Welcome back for another installment of Fellowship of the Rink. With me, as always, Joe Smith of The Athletic, bringing you all the insider info on your Minnesota Wild. And I guess just NHL-wide coverage, especially I know Russo's out covering Carolina, Florida, which just some of the stuff that's happening over there is hilarious to me. Like, I can't get past the Matthew Tkachuk like being obnoxious and making as much noise as possible with the medicine ball throws right behind the stage. As I think it was Jordan Stahl and Taylor Hall maybe that were being interviewed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the gamesmanship that people never hear about in playoffs is something else. Even in like the Wild Vegas series, I think there was a time when like Hines like took for a while after a game, and then so like the next time, Cassidy took forever after a game to come to the press conference. Like it was just like, and one team had flights, one team didn't, right? So it's kind of all, this thing that happens sometimes in the middle of a playoff series that aren't very important or don't affect the games, but they're just kind of like little quirks between the very competitive people at times when the tensions are very high. But yeah, that's a little more of a lighthearted one, especially in medicine ball against not many places. I guess, there are some places in that arena to put maybe a media setup for it. But, you look at places they've had Zoom rooms in arenas around the league is, the cramped as can be. So not surprised. Even in Toronto, there's the Zoom room was like a really tiny little mini locker room thing. So anyways, but Florida looks like they're a wagon right now.
And how? It's crazy. All the teams that were like, oh, there's like an injury or something that has me hesitant on the team, like all of them have advanced. Like Dallas, people were down because of Robertson and Heiskanen. You got, Carolina, just because of how everything shook out with the Rantanen trade, that people were down on them. Florida, between Tkachuk and whatever is going on with Ekblad and continuing to be suspended. It's, and then Edmonton is still waiting to get their stud defenseman back in Ekholm. It's like, how are these the four teams? And oh my gosh, are they all going to continue to level up and give us even better hockey?
Well, my picks before the playoffs were Dallas versus Tampa in the Cup final, and I know Dallas looked a little wonky in the beginning. I stand by them right now. They're arguably the deepest team left. Florida's. Look at their third line.
Yeah,
outscoring teams like 11-2. Like Marchand's in your third line. It's just like they're incredible. They're just so deep and they're so tenacious, and like guys have won before. Like they get it. Reminds me somewhat of those Cup teams I covered in Tampa, just where they were relentless with their depth, and their third line was a difference maker. And how they got great goaltending from a Russian goaltender, and like they had the star power up front, and the star powers play with grit. So I think I see some similarities there.
Well, it feels like the annual tradition, right? Of everyone forgetting, like, hey, like who's the best player on each team? And it's like, no, like the team that has the best, like third line, even bottom six, like that ends up being such a difference maker when you look at like the actual gamesmanship and strategy going into each series. But I'm like you, I was flipped. I had Colorado losing to Carolina in the finals, and it's like, oh, both of us lost our Cup guys right away. But then on the other side, we're still alive. So I guess Dallas, Carolina is our little healthy competition. But it's good hockey. And it's unfortunate, too, that people are just like kind of shitting on Carolina for being boring. And game one didn't do them any favors in negating that. But like, it's a good hockey team. And I actually enjoy watching them play. But I guess I'm in the minority.
They're really well coached. Like, I don't think they're boring at all. They play fast, right? They play fast. They have some skill. Like, how are they any more boring than Florida is, right? I don't know. It's just like they play fast paced. They shoot a lot from everywhere. So it could seem as though that, but every team dumps and chases, this time of year. So I don't know. I still like Carolina. I think they're going to make the series longer than maybe what game one looked like. But, but clearly you have four really, really good teams left and models for, I think, teams to follow. Like, this is how you get here.
For sure. And a little bit of wild talk here for everybody. I know we missed it last week. We do have Craig Button coming up. Awesome, lengthy interview. Guy's just an absolute pro. Like, I could sit down and talk to him about hockey every day. No problem. But Joe, on the Wild front, we finally have it confirmed. The Russian that everyone was, I guess, second most anxiously awaiting is the signing of Danila Yurov's ELC. Let's go.
I'm excited just to see him play, right? Like, to see him play in person. I know he's at a dev camp before, but it's like all the hype with this kid, and deservedly so. And he performed well in a League of Men, a pro league in the KHL, and he broke some records there, and he won a championship. I think that's what Bill Guerin mentioned on his conference call. What he likes the most is he's a winner. He's tasted winning, and he came back this year maybe early from his injury to play hurt in a playoff situation. So, I think there's a lot to be, said or debated about where he fits in the lineup and what happens there. That'll be decided when we see him play in training camp and all that stuff like that. But, the Wild are excited about the legit skill that he has, his playmaking and his scoring ability, how he moved to center pretty well, obviously. Not an easy transition to make, and they feel he's a center. That's his future in the NHL. They're going to start him there. So I think we'll see how any growing pains as far as playing 200 foot or playing defensively. But I think, Wild fans are just excited to see, the management and players are excited to see who this kid is and how he can fit, because he might have some holes to fill up front and in the middle if the Wild do end up trading Marco Rossi.
For sure. And can you explain to everybody too, because I know a lot of fans are either confused or just unaware of the nuances of his contract, right? Danila Yurov will not play in Iowa. Like that's pretty cemented. We don't know where he's going to land in the Minnesota Wild lineup for sure, but can you just explain to everybody like how and why that's taken shape?
Well, I mean, it was kind of not a negative or protracted, but just a little lengthy kind of negotiations over bonuses and stuff like that. But one of the interesting clauses in the contract is he has an out clause for all 3 years of his entry-level deal. Most guys, Europeans, might have a 1-year out clause for that, which basically kind of gives them leverage of like, not getting sent down or like whatever else, whatever reason that they're unhappy, they have the chance they can go back and play. Like I think Danilo would be the first to tell you he wants to play in the NHL and he wants to be a difference maker. So I don't think that's meant as for anything about him not wanting to be in Minnesota or not wanting him to be a pro. But there is little added leverage there in those 3 years where I really don't see him playing in Iowa at all. And it's like probably the Wild hope he doesn't have to, right? So I think if all goes well and he's the guy everybody thinks he is, then the out clause won't really matter.
That is the hope.
Yeah. So
fair.
This is not like him playing third line all of a sudden I'm out of here. I think there's I think it's obviously flexibility on his end, but definitely some more nuance to his contract.
For sure. And you touched on it already, but again, tea leaves from you and Russo for who knows how long at this point, is that the likelihood is Rossi's gone, and we're hoping that Yurov can be a guy that steps in and fills those shoes. Has there been any further discussion? Like, are they even trying to find a workable contract, or at this point, is it just aggressive shopping for Bill Guerin?
Well, I think there's still time, right? And so I don't think like conversations have stopped. I think that there's also a line of what the Wild are comfortable in paying, right? And I don't think that's necessarily changed, or maybe the offer that was out there before, I don't know if Marco is actually taking that if it's offered again now, like the 5x5 or whatever. I think the other side offered a shorter bridge deal with a higher AAV after the 5x5 wasn't taken, but I don't think there was any movement on the Wild's end on that end. So
sure.
I don't see a drastic change from the Wild end in terms of, okay, you didn't want 5x5, let's give you 5 times 8, or I don't think they're at this point going to give him like a long-term deal. So never say never. There's always a chance something comes back, but I think the all likelihood right now is the fact that you'll see a lot of talk and a lot of chatter about Marco Rossi up towards the draft. And I think closer towards the draft is when you'll probably see movement there on that end, if indeed, which I think we all believe is the case, that them both sides parting ways. And the key, I think, and we asked Craig Button this in our interview, is what the return will be. And there's going to be a lot of value around the league for a guy like Marco Rossi. The key is what happens, what the Wild do with it. But to answer your question, never say never. I don't think they've stopped talking to each other completely, but I just think that there's very clear, probably this is what I'm comfortable paying this player at, and the other side of this is where I'm where I feel like I'm valued. And like Marco Rossi told us in his exit interview, he had a pretty honest, man-like, quote-unquote, talk with John Hines after the season to go over back and forth. I don't know, if everything's perfectly resolved. I'm sure what happened in the playoffs still kind of stings Marco in that respect, but he'll never talk negative about the organization. He's always team first with him, and you have to respect that for what he did and how he handled himself as a pro for a young player in this organization, if it is it. But I think we'll probably know more on that in coming weeks as it gets closer to the draft, and that's when a lot more of the chatter comes around as far as teams making offers, that kind of thing, or teams that want an offer sheet, which would probably won't get to that point if there's a deal to be made before that.
Fair. Well, so that's going to be sorted out at some point here this summer, obviously. Let's talk then what the Wild do beyond that to fill holes. And again, we talk about this a little bit with Craig Button, but as far as guys in the playoffs, or maybe even not playoff guys, whatever, but has anyone stood out to you as being like, oh God, that'd really be a nice one for us to go grab? Like, perfect guy to fill a certain hole, or someone that maybe is realistic to get? I don't know. Like, who is top of mind for you, Joe, of like, Billy, please?
Well, isn't watching Florida make you think, if you're a team, like, who would want to have the combination of Bennett and Marchand? Like, give them your $15 million or whatever, right? Like, obviously that's not going to happen or whatever like that. But like, you talk about getting better in the middle of the ice, or getting playoff caliber guys with size and all that. And Bennett's right up there. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that the Wild necessarily afford, or with whatever they're going for. I think Brock Nelson's a guy that I think there's mutual interest there. The key will be what the contract look like, in terms of how that plays out. But I think they clearly want to get Joel Eriksson help up the middle. They want to get somebody that could play a number 2C role. That way Hartman can play a 3C, you're off, depending on how he plays and develops, can be the 3C or whatever it might be. And you have kind of, Hartman playing the wing and whatever. So they want to get more depth up the middle. And especially when you move a guy like Marco, if you do move him, you'll need some more. And so I think Nelson is a guy probably that they'll look at. But I just think from watching the playoffs, like, Bennett's been a beast, and he's done it all different ways. And the problem is he'll be really highly sought after too in free agency, and you'll want to, where's he going to want to go? So that's the thing where if you could find some help, and I think Bill Guerin mentioned too, he wouldn't be opposed to a scoring wing too, depending on how it works out. So we'll see.
Yeah, I very much would like the idea of, because again, centers that are free agents are going to be really expensive, and really Bennett's the only one that I think people are like very excited about pursuing. But guess what? Every team's going to feel that way. On the wing, getting a Marchand or a Corey Perry is very appealing to me. Guys that are absolute gamers. Like, a lot of guys will talk about, like, there's the players that get you there, and there's the players that get you through. We've got the guys that can get us there. We can get to the playoffs. Like, we're pretty confident as long as we get some semblance of health. We need the guys that can get us through, and that's what they are to a T. And I like the versatility, right? You could play feasibly Marchand or Perry on your first, second, third, or fourth line. They can both serve roles in the power play. They can both kill penalties. Like, I think those are guys that make a ton of sense. Now, do they have interest in coming here? Do they think that the Wild are in the spot that we're talking about? Who knows? The one that's actually really interesting to me that I kind of want your opinion on, because I've seen this I'm pretty deep in Pittsburgh Penguins stuff too. A lot of speculated and liked the idea of some kind of trade for Marco Rossi revolving around Brian Rust coming back from Pittsburgh. He is a Bill Guerin guy through and through. Same versatility up and down the lineup, like I talked about with those guys, but he brings the speed element. He is a goal scorer. Do you see that being something that Billy would entertain, or is any trade with Rossi going to have to involve a center?
I don't know if it'll have to involve a center. I think they have to address the center position somewhere or another, in a roundabout way, whether it's free agency or other trades, or like obviously, ideal. Oh, like let's trade a center, Marco Rossi, and get another center back that would be in a similar spot of a top 10 pick, not fit in that organization, come back and maybe fit there. But doesn't have to be a center, I don't think. I think they still have to address the center position no matter what this summer. So whether it has to be part of, if the Rossi trade is better value, not getting a center back, as long as you have something in the plan for addressing that position, I think that it can still work.
For sure. All right. Well, with that, let's kick it over to Craig Button. We've got NHL Draft. We've got Wild prospects. Busy offseason for the Wild, even Leaf sadness mixed in. Let's throw it over. This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it. That makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order. Joining the show today is one of us, having spent 4 years scouting for the now defunct, I'm sorry everyone, Minnesota North Stars. He's since served in several front office roles and now finds himself at TSN as director of scouting. Appreciate you jumping on, Craig Button.
Hey, my pleasure to join you. It's always great this time of the year. We got the playoffs going on. Who's going to play for the Stanley Cup? It's been a nice season for the NHL. With the Four Nations, which was fantastic, and now we got great hockey in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and it's spring. That means the snow's melted. That's all good too.
The Minnesota summers are notoriously legendary, and they started 2 weeks ago. Then they stopped for about a week for like some rain and 30-degree temperatures. So we're ready for summer to get back again for us. The name of our podcast is Fellowship of the Rink. As you see, Lord of the Rings fans, both of us are. I wasn't sure if you're a Lord of the Rings fan or if you have a nerd itch that you scratch sometime, like a movie series, book series, or like collectible that's kind of your jam away from hockey.
I think we failed our daughters because we read the Harry Potter series to them, which we really should have had them read it themselves. So if they were delayed in their reading comprehension, you only have the parents to blame. But then the movies came out, so I'm kind of aging myself because you got books, hardcover books that we read to them, and they loved it. And then the movies came out, and you're thinking to yourself, I spent hours and hours reading those books to my kids. Like, why couldn't we just jump to the movies? But it's just the way it went. So
that's insane, though, Craig. So you sat down and you read those books. Like, were you doing just like a chapter a night, or how do you even break down a massive book like that for reading to your kids?
Yeah, we did it in bits and pieces. I mean, when they're younger, there's only so much they can take in anyway. But it was usually at night. It wasn't just one of us; it was both of us. And in full disclosure, it was more my wife than it was me. But it was fun because they were enthralled. They were enthralled with it. And I think one of the things that when you read or you're being read to, it opens up your imagination. It opens up you picture things in a different way than when you see them like on screen or on TV. So I think that that's a good positive thing about reading because you conjure up your own images in your own mind how things should look. And I think when the movies come out, it was always interesting to hear my kids and their friends talk about, oh, that's not how I pictured Harry. That's not how I pictured so-and-so. And it was very, very interesting how you develop your own images and create your own images.
Well, you mentioned the Stanley Cup playoffs are full under swing here. Conference finals are going on, and a big talking point, of course, was the Toronto Maple Leafs series losing in 7 games to the Florida Panthers. And, you know, obviously you've been a GM in this league. If you're the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, like, what do you do at this point? I know it's been 7, 8, 9 years running, and I think they've put the emphasis on, oh, this is like the Red Wings of back in the day. This is like the Washington Capitals that broke through. This is like the Lightning that broke through finally. Like, if you're the GM of this team, like, I guess, what is your next approach?
Yeah, you know, Joe, it's interesting. You know, when I came to the Calgary Flames in 2000, after being with Minnesota and Dallas, and in 1988, when I started with the Northern, we were the worst team in the league. We were right at the bottom of the league. And yeah, there was some trials and there were some tribulations for our group. I mean, 91 was magical when we went to the Stanley Cup final out of nowhere, really, to be straightforward. But we built up our team. We ended up moving. We had some financial struggles. The league was going through its own financial changes with respect to contracts and salaries and revenues and everything that went with it. But at the end of it, 11 years later, we ended up winning the Stanley Cup. We were a really good team and whatnot. So the reason I give you that, and I go now into Calgary, is I came into Calgary with a similar idea. Okay, we're going to build this. We're going to do it right. And at the end of the day, they had missed the playoffs for 5 straight years. When I started, it was only the first year I missed the playoffs the first year, but now it was 6. And then the next year was 7. And you're building. And what I realized a lot better now that I didn't realize at the time was my patience was guided by getting to an end result. The league and the business of the league had been changing so drastically. And now the owner's patience wasn't the same as mine. And I think the reason I tell that story is because Brad Treliving's only got 2 years under his belt. And it was just about 2 years ago that he was named the GM. So he's dealing with 9 years, but he's only been able to deal with it for 2. I think he's done a really, really strong job of rebuilding the blue line with a blue line that can win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Because there's certain templates that are never going to change in the NHL, and that are fundamentals to any sport. And the blue line, if you want to win the Stanley Cup, you have to have certain elements on that blue line: length and reach and weight, and be able to move the puck quickly. You don't have to. Obviously, offensive defensemen are coveted, and you want them and you need them, but you need other types of players. I think Brad's done a really nice job of that. I think the goaltending's in a good place. I think what isn't in place, and this is the difficult part for Brad now, is what do you do with the forward group? I mean, they've been a really good regular season team, and nobody can deny that. But when Kyle Dubas was the general manager and Brendan Shanahan the president, because he was full on board with this, they thought that artistic hockey was the way to win in the playoffs. What has been clearly shown and will always be shown, it's not about one style or another. It's about a blend of styles. And when you want to put all your eggs in one basket and go artistic, you're not going to win in the playoffs. And you're not going to win when it matters. And you're not going to beat good teams that have the template in order. And to me, now, that's where Brad has to really go and look at what he's doing. Change has to happen. And, I get asked continuously, what about this player? What about this player? When I was part of management, our goal was always what's best for the team. I didn't go in looking to trade players. But if it can improve the team, and I told the players this, if we can improve the team, then I'm going to look to do it. But I'm not looking to say every day I'm looking to trade you or looking to trade you. You're looking to improve the team. And I think that's what Brad has to do. And for me, everything is on the table. There is nothing that's not on the table. And Joe Thornton, who was the first overall pick in 1997, got traded by the Boston Bruins to San Jose Sharks. He also went on that year to win the Hart Trophy. And, you don't think that's not painful for the Boston Bruins at that particular moment in time? But they knew they had to change things. It wasn't about Joe. They just had to look at doing things differently with a different group of players. They won the Cup in 2011. So I think that Brad Treliving has to look at it exactly the same way. Nothing is off the table. No player, no consideration is off the table in trying to improve the team. Unless ownership comes out and says, we're very happy being a good regular season team. We like the artistry that they perform on the ice. And if we happen to win in the playoffs by some kind of fluke, we'll take it.
Well, if the seats are full and they're paying the money, then I guess some people can be happy with that one. The thing about patient fan bases, Craig, and I think Minnesota has to be up there, just in terms of lack of getting out of the first round the last decade, and you've been in this around this franchise or this hockey market since the beginning. Where do you see them in the pecking order of the West right now? It seems like it's only getting tougher in the Central Division with the teams that are there. Obviously, they felt they could almost broke through here against Vegas in the first round. Felt they had a chance and maybe deserved to win that series necessarily. With this team, this core, whatever like that, we're in the pecking order of the West. Like, do they have a chance of like making a little bit more of a push in coming years here, or is it just what would you feel on that?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question, quite frankly, that this is a team on the rise. I think that, and it goes back to how to patience, impatience, understanding. I think Bill Guerin came in and he looked at the situation, he evaluated it for a period of time, and he said, "Wait, I got to make some changes." And the most difficult thing that he had to do was buy out Ryan Suter and Zach Parise, and with it came a real albatross, because the buyout money really hindered the Minnesota Wild from being able to spend. But at the same time, what it allowed them to do was put some players into positions that maybe they wouldn't have had if they were going out and signing free agents or trading for players. And I think that that's allowed the team and the younger players to get a lot better. I think they drafted so well. I think they got difference makers in the net. I think they got difference makers on the blue line. I think they got difference makers up front. And now with a load of cap space becoming available to Bill Guerin, I think he's got a great opportunity to add to the team. You're going to fill in some areas, and you're going to add in some areas and bolster and strengthen. But that's the opportunity now for Bill Guerin. So going through the time period, he now finds himself at a point in time where he can now look and say, okay, how do we bolster our team? I'll go back to our team in Dallas. In 95, 96, we were terrible. We had traded for Joe Nieuwendyk, and we were not a good team. But what we were doing was moving forward. And by trading for Joe Nieuwendyk, what it allowed us to do was show people around the league, players, that we were serious. We ended up trading for Sergei Zubov. We signed Pat Verbeek. We signed Dave Reed. So when you're talking about trading for Sergei Zubov, you need the money to do that. We were able, with new ownership, new funding, to be able to do that. Patty Verbeek, a free agent, we were able to get him to come on. Dave Reed, he bolstered our lineup in a different place. That led to other things. That led to being able to sign Eddie Belfour in 97. It led to signing Brett Hull in 1998. All the building blocks were in place. I think that's where Billy finds himself right at this moment in time. He's got a really good group of players. He's got a really good group, in my view, of difference makers at key positions. Now it's how you bolster it. And that, to me, now is where Billy will be judged on, and how you take it to the next level. And Billy was part of it as a player when he came over to Pittsburgh, and they won the Stanley Cup in 09. He was part of it in management with Pittsburgh when they won the Cups in 16 and 17. So now Billy's in the seat, and Billy's the one that has to make those decisions. But I think the Minnesota Wild find themselves in a really, really positive light.
So I'm curious, because the biggest push and pull with fans, and you said it, right? The drafting has been great. We got a good prospect pool. Now the money's off the books for those buyouts. How do you balance and assess where they're at in their trajectory, bringing in free agents versus letting some of those young players come in and fill those roles?
Well, you can't have a team full of young players. And again, it's like, you got to ask yourself, where do you want to bolster your lineup? Where do you want to add? Like, those young players, like, what young players are ready to play? The benefit that Minnesota and Billy got is they didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice. That they had to put some players in the spot because the money was what the money was, and their cap situation was what it was. There's going to be players that you're going to have to move on. I'll give you an example. In 1998, we had drafted Todd Harvey, 9th overall in 93, and he was the first pick in Dallas Stars history. But in 99, we liked Todd. We liked Todd lots. We had all kinds of Todd. But we had an opportunity to get Mike Keane and Brian Skrudland. Did we just go, yeah, you can have Todd Harvey? No, that was a hard move for us to make. That was really difficult to say we're going to trade somebody that we really believed in and we knew was. But we just looked at what Mike Keane and Brian Skrudland could bring to our group. And so we had to make that decision. So I think you're always balancing out the young versus what you may need. And I think that's where Billy has to balance it out and understand what it is. Because again, you need players to bolster your lineup that can add things, whether it be experience, whether it be a specific area of the team, whether it be all of the above. And young players, they don't all have all that. So you got to evaluate where you're at any particular moment in your team's progression. And I think this team has progressed. Nobody is going to tell you, and you guys know this, you're close to it, that Minnesota isn't a hard team to play against, that they're not a hard out. Like, they're competitive. And that's the first, we talk about Toronto. Toronto wishes they had what Minnesota had in terms of competitive spirit.
Fair. And you talk about trading 9th overall picks, and that is very much at the forefront right now for the Wild. A little bit different because it sounds like you were a little conflicted, and Wild have kind of indicated Marco Rossi's on his way out. Like, what do you think the value is at this point with how the season ended, with what you've seen in his development since being drafted? What's a reasonable return for Marco Rossi?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Let me just go to Marco. I think Marco, let's keep in mind, where he came through during the pandemic and where he lost valuable development time, as did other players. And I think Marco's done, he's been terrific, I think, in terms of not only the challenges of the pandemic, but then his own personal health issues that he had to deal with. And he went down to Iowa and he went and played and he dug in and he showed that he can be a really good player in the National Hockey League. I don't think there's anybody that looks at Marco Rossi and says, you're not a good player. I think you can clearly see that. So when I look at Marco, and the first thing I'd like to say is this: be careful about trading skill. Like, be careful. I made a brutal trade, and there was other factors behind it, and not personal. It was more monetary and financial with Mark Savard. And what I should have done is I should have said, no, I'm not trading him. That's not, because it was about just moving money out. And that was the wrong thing to do. And as a manager, you got to stand up to that and say, no, and I didn't. And that was on me. And that's not on anybody else. So with Marco, and Scotty Bowman said to me, he said, that's a pretty skilled player, Craig. Those guys aren't easy to find. So, it's great when you talk about a point in time, but if there's been an intersection of what I would call, I don't want to say irreparable. That sounds like there's damage there, but like where player and team feel they got to go in different directions, that intersection, then you got to look at what it would be. I looked at the Montreal Canadiens. They're dying for a player like Marco Rossi to be their second line center. They're dying to have a guy like that. So, I think, first of all, you look at where a team could benefit from the skill set that Marco adds. And then you start to look, okay, do they have things that we could use in our lineup? What does it mean? And it's not just, you can't just look at it in isolation. You have to look at it and go, okay, if we get a player back and it's an older player that can help us for 2 years and there's money, how does that help us with a contract down the road, have some money, and everything that goes with it? The evaluation isn't just about what you get back in return. That is a part of it, don't get me wrong. But there's so many other factors that go into trading a player and what you're trying to do with your team. But I can't imagine that Marco Rossi would not have value and real good value around the NHL, because there's teams screaming for that type of player.
And it's almost like, be careful what if you make a move, those moves are sometimes the best moves are ones you don't make, right? Or you keep a guy versus, trading a guy at different times in his career. I'll
tell you a quick story back to Minnesota days. And we traded, Jack Ferrera was the general manager, and traded for Larry Murphy and Mike Gartner. And was part of our team. Well, then we had ownership change. New general manager came in, Bob Clark. And Larry Murphy, who was with our team in training camp, we were chatting, and he said to me, he goes, I'm going to get traded. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to get traded? You're not getting traded. You're too good. He goes, no, I don't think the manager likes me. And I go, what? Why would he like you? And he goes, I don't know. I just don't think it. Well, in November, we traded Larry Murphy to Pittsburgh. And I don't know if it was 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks or 4 weeks, but we were on a call and we were trying to find a player that was like Larry Murphy. Dennis Patterson, who was our chief scout at the time, we're going through these players. Well, this guy, that guy. Finally, Dennis goes, we just traded a pretty good one a couple of weeks ago, and the call ended. And you know what, we traded for Kevin Hatcher. He just wasn't a fit for us. It wasn't until we got Sergei Zubov that we finally replaced Larry Murphy. Yeah, 5.5 years later.
Yeah, that's a good lesson or a good important point about it. You try to find, once you lose a guy, you have to replace him at some point, right? The 60 points, the 24 goals, all that stuff goes there. A guy that they're not going to want to trade or replace is Kirill Kaprizov. Contract talks will be starting or finishing this summer that they hope. Where is he in the hierarchy of the league in terms of his top 7 player, top 10 player, and like what makes him unique in your mind in terms of a foundational player you can build around?
I love that word, Joe, foundational, because that's what he is. And, and he's a difference maker and he's a top player. Rantanen just signed for what, $12 million a year in Dallas. I mean, we can look at market dynamics and everything when it comes to taxes and everything. I mean, that's where Kaprizov, he's in that category of player. Now, we know the cap's going up. Players don't want to be left behind with leaving dollars behind that they could get. Minnesota's going to have to evaluate that. Bottom line is that he's a top 10 player in this league. The way he was playing at the beginning of the season through the first part of the season, he was right there in the MVP conversation. The injury took him out of that. But make no mistake about it, this is an MVP caliber player. So what is that? They're like 12 million, 12.5 million, 13 million. Like that's where he's at. And there's no question that the Minnesota Wild and from where I sit and the distance I'm at, this has got to be an automatic. Find a way to get him signed because you just don't find these players, and you can't replace them. Look, like Martin Necas is a really, really good player. He's not Mikko Rantanen. Logan Stankoven's a good young player. He's not Mikko Rantanen. And so who benefits? The Dallas Stars benefit. Yeah.
You can't replace those guys, and you're not going to pick in the top 10 ever again, you think, like he was a 5th rounder, but that's a whole other story in itself.
Yep.
You look at the money that they have available. They have $16.4 million in cap space this summer. Obviously, they're a team that feels like they're on the rise, like you mentioned. What are some areas where you think they should address in free agency, or what are the kind of players that, like, hey, this would be a great, like a Sam Bennett or whoever it might be, who's a great fit for the Wild that would make sense in free agency or trade, I guess, if you put that in mind.
Yeah, I would say there's 2 areas. Obviously, this is a really competitive team. And I think that you're not going to find, you can find Mitch Marner. You can look at Mitch Marner and say he can add to our offense. Like everybody knows that. That would eat up most of your $16 million that's left. I think if they can bolster some of their forward group. One of the things that I watched, you guys did too, is when Eriksson Ek was out and Kaprizov was out. Who they have to roll out on the power play. They tried, but there was a real fall off there. I think they have to build that gap. They have to build some strength in that middle area between the top line and those top players. And Boldy was out too. But those next group of players, so that you don't fall off so much, because that was a huge part of when I say the fall off for the Minnesota Wild, it was where they struggled to win games in the absence of those players. So that would be if you're going to have injuries, you're going to have injuries. Nobody's going into the season thinking you're not going to have injuries, but that would be the one area that I would really try to boost. Like I would try to get into that area of the team. I like the moves that he made. I think they got some weight and heft deeper down their lineup, but like call it middle 6 forwards, call it like the 5, 6, 7 in that range of forwards. That I think if they can find some players that can fill in and add offense and take some of the burden off those top guys, I think it would really help. I also believe they got to find a goaltender. They got to find a goaltender. I'm not so sure right now at this time that Wallstadt's ready to give Gustafsson what he needs. Now, maybe Jesper doesn't want to hear that, but there is Gustafsson is still young, and I don't think another young goalie trying to find his way is the answer for the Minnesota Wild. So I think they got to go and find. I like what Brad Treliving did by bringing Stolars in for Joe Woll. That type of move, I think, would really benefit. We all love Marc-Andre Fleury. We all wish Marc-Andre Fleury would be timeless in terms of playing in the NHL. But I think somebody like Anthony Stolars to come in for Gustafsson would be really, really positive for the goaltending situation. So That would be the two areas I'd be looking at. Their blue line's fine. I have no problem with their blue line. Everybody's greedy. Everybody wants a little bit more, but I think that's a really good blue line. And Buium's going to be a star. I have no doubt about that.
I wanted to ask you about the prospects. I guess we could start with Zeev. You got a chance to, 19 years old, can't even drink yet. He's going to the Stanley Cup Playoffs, game 1 in Vegas. Like he stepped in right there. Like, what makes you think he can be a star or make him more than just, make him a star at the blue line position, which is so difficult to have?
Well, I mean, he reminds me a lot of Scott Niedermayer, the way he plays. Is he going to get 90 points? I don't think he's going to be a 90-point guy, but he's going to be somebody that's just so efficient in his game. The puck always gets to the right places. He's a great skater. He's got great mind, speed, and understanding of the game. And once he gets those reps, he's going to become a big minute player. He's done it. He's done it. I've watched him play since he was 15 years old. Like, when you watch somebody have that success and command the game and control the game for that long, now it's just a matter of okay, we'll just watch him do it. Somebody asked me about Lane Hudson last summer and about Montreal. And I said, I've yet to see a level that Lane Hudson didn't master. I feel the same way about Zeev Buium. The exact same way. Like, and we know Lane Hudson, I mean, he got my first place vote in the Calder Trophy this year. But to me, Zeev, that Scott Niedermayer-esque ability to just control the game, and whatever you're asked to do, there's not a lot of fanfare to it. There's not a lot of flash to it, but it's just incredidible substance and productivity. And he's a winner. Because you need those types of guys. Now you have him. You have Faber, right? Spurgeon's a big time. That takes burden off of him. We know how good Brodin is. Can Jiricek come in and be a guy that can find his way, big, bulky? I think the best thing for Jiricek is come in and be a bottom pair defenseman. Like he was drafted high. He's not going to be a top pair defenseman. He's just not going to be. So accept who you are, accept what he is, and then go on from there. That's what I think.
I guess, what is Jiricek to you then? Like, what is he in your
bottom
mind?
Pair defenseman, a right shot, number 5 defenseman on the right side. Big, bulky, play defense, stop worrying about offense. He's not going to do that. Too many teams, Joe, they draft a player, and they got to be realistic about what the potential is. And teams make mistakes in this regard. They overproject the player, and then they say, oh, he's not this. Okay, that's great. He's not that. Was that his fault or was it your fault? And you better come to a realization that what he is may not be what you thought he was. And then you start to evaluate, okay, what is he and how much do we value it? I think David can be he's always been a competitor. He's big. He's got size. He'll play physically. He'll play good. So just embrace it and stop talking about being the 5th overall pick or the 6th overall pick. And, he's not. Like, he is what he is, in my view. And so to me, young players on entry-level contracts like that he's on, that can be really valuable. Yeah.
Well, I know they gave up a lot in the trade for him, so that's why people have expectations of, like, this guy, could be. They pay up a first round, 4 draft picks, and David Hunt for him. They're like, okay, they want to see more than maybe a bottom pairing defenseman. But if that's who you are, that's who you are, right? You can't be who you're not necessarily.
I would tell him, go try to be Brandon Carlo or Eric Chernak.
Those are pretty valuable pieces on the both teams that they've been on. A guy that Wild fans I haven't seen enough play is Danila Yurov. From watching him and the time you have, like, what kind of player could he be at this level? They're going to have him at center, I know that, but what kind of player could he be at this level?
He's skilled, he's smart, and he's got some weight and size to him. I think playing in the KHL and having success, I mean, it's not easy to play in the KHL. The game's a little bit slower. The game's a little bit more methodical. But I think for a young player to kind of understand that grind, I think it helps a young player. And I think that the timing for Yurov to come over now is good. Like coming in, like John Hines is gonna. You got to push the pace. You got to be quick. And I think he can do that. I think the other benefit for Yurov is he's got Kaprizov right there with him. Like, don't ever underestimate the importance of having somebody that's an absolute star and is going to do everything to help a young player. That's invaluable. And I think for Yurov, again, we start to look at him. Like, that's another player that can come in and really help your team. He doesn't have to be the frontline guy. And when I talk about free agents or trade targets, you might have that guy. It might not be until January. It might not be till February where he starts to really show it. But that 4, 5, 6, 7 in that group of forwards after the top guys, I think that's the type of player you want to get. And I think he can become a really good player in that regard.
What about some of the other forward prospects? Like we've got the ones talked about a lot, Ohgren, Height, which I know that's going to give people a lot of trouble if they're ever playing together. But looking further out, like projecting a couple of years down the road, because they're all at different spots in their development, like which one of those excites you the most, or do you think can bring the most impact?
I think Liam Ohgren will be a really good third line winger. Full stop. You need third line wingers. You need to I ask the cap, and I'm just going now. Go watch those teams in Tampa Bay win cups. Do you want Blake Coleman on your team? Darn right you do. And they traded a first round pick for Blake Coleman. So what's the big deal? Well, they traded more than that. They traded Nolan Foote and a first round pick to get Blake Coleman. All he did was help them win 2 Stanley Cups. And to me, that's Liam Ohgren. Liam Ohgren is that big, hard, heavy, determined, competitive player. He's smart. So much of the time, first round pick. He's not going to be a first line player. Most of them aren't.
Right.
He's not going to be a top pair defenseman. Most of them aren't. That's just reality. But this whole idea about first round pick, I want Liam Ohgren on my team. He's been the captain of his age group in Sweden. He's won. He's been a real key player when it gets hard and it gets heavy. That's the type of player that I think Liam can be. Riley Height's going to need a few years in the minors. He's a center. He's got a lot of gifts. He's got a lot of skill. But he's going to have to find a way to harden his game. When you have that much skill, and it's not that junior hockey's easy for him, but he's going to have to harden his skill in terms of some of the details, not in terms of toughness or anything. It's not about the details. Hard on the puck, hard in position. I'm not circling, I'm stopping. That's what I mean about harden his game, because it's hard to stop, and it's hard to be on a puck, and it's hard to stay in a battle. But that's what I think Riley has to be able to do to be able to advance his game. He's got a lot of skill. Make no mistake about it.
You said in Stramo, like another first round pick who could be a useful third or fourth line center, right? Like you think in your mind?
Yeah, he could. One of the things in Prince George this year, they had him kill penalties, and they made him. And even last year, they said embrace that area of the game, and he did. He really took heart to that. And he's not going to be a first line center. So one of the things, how do you gain the trust of your coach? You gain the trust of your coach by being 2 things: consistent and dependable. They're not interchangeable. They're non-negotiable. And so how do you do those things? Well, I tell you, if you're not going to be a first-line center, you better be good in other areas of the game. You better be good when you don't have the puck. You better be good in those battles. You better be good in understanding that, I'm not going to circle. I'm not going to loop. I'm going to stay right here, and I'm going to make it hard for a team to adapt. That's a second-line center. That's a third-line center. That's, to me, where Riley has to find his game. When I say harden those areas of his game, if he does, he'll play in the NHL. If he doesn't, he won't.
Very fair. Obviously, a lot of your time right now being more dedicated towards the 2025 NHL Draft. I've seen ranging opinions here, but I'm always curious to hear from different analysts. When does the draft start in your mind? Like, what's the consensus look like? Like, are you sure that, a lot of people I'm seeing have Schaefer and Misa pretty firmly penciled in at 1 and 2. Like, where do you think the draft gets interesting?
Yeah, well, it might get interesting right at 2. And because San Jose has that pick, and Michael Misa is a really good player. Like, make no mistake about it. I think if they were picking 1, it was automatic. They're taking Schaefer.
Yeah.
But they have Will Smith and they have Macklin Celebrini. So there's nothing wrong. Michael's played left wing and played it very well. But I see him as a center. And is he going to be? Is that where the San Jose Sharks go? Well, we're going to do. I think there's other good players that they're in that area. The draft is about building out your team and adding players that have, like we just talked about, different types of players. And So I think at 2 with the San Jose Sharks, it gets interesting. Do they stay there? Do they move back? Do they take Misa? Do they take somebody else? That's where I think it gets really interesting. Is at that spot in the draft. This is a center heavy draft. When I say center heavy, through 2022 guys it's loaded with centers. And I think teams are looking. There's groups. There's a group at the top, which includes Misa and Hagens and Frondell. And then you got a group with Jake O'Brien, and then you got Roger McQueen, who's been injured. Like, you got a group, and then you get to the next group, and it's really fascinating in terms of me of seeing the number of centers that are going to be available in the top 20 picks or so.
Yeah, and the Wild, again, with the Marco Rossi trade speculation, they traded away their first round pick, but the potential of getting one back for Wild fans, if they were to trade back into the first round, like, is there anyone in the teens to 20s at center that you feel is maybe being overlooked, or is a guy that could be a steal?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to find out who the steals are in about 4 years' time. Because I could tell you right now who the steal is, and I'd have them way up on the list, right?
Yeah.
And I think anybody would. Everybody's looking for those. I think there's a couple of different types of players. One of the things, and again, I'm going to go back to Marco Rossi. So Marco Rossi isn't the biggest of players, but Cole Reshny, who's a really good center, Braden Coots, who's a really good center, they're not the biggest of guys. So let's just say they end up picking somewhere between 15 and 20, right? And because they get a pick. Well, now again, we're back to the Marco Rossi discussion. So you're going to trade Marco Rossi for a first round pick that you're going to get a similar type player that comes in there. So I'm not so sure there's a center there that really fits where they're at. I mean, the top guys are gone. If somewhere along the line, I think Roger McQueen is a really good player. I think he's a Ryan Getzlaf type player, and he's had a back injury this year, and those things require rest and time and patience. I don't know where he's going to end up in the draft. It's not my job to do the medical stuff, but from a skill point of view, a 6'5" centerman, I'd I don't know. I mean, last year the Minnesota Wild were looking at potentially trading out of the pick, and Zeev Buium was there, right? So you got to be ready for different things, and there might be some opportunities in there. I'm not suggesting that Roger McQueen would be in that area of the draft. It's going to be a lot of work, but those other centermen who I think are really good. I think Marco's really good. Because you're not just trading for a first round pick. You're also trading 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. No, that's fair. Last draft question before we wrap on final question we do for everyone on our show. For the Gopher fans, we talked about size. LJ Mooney, how much have you watched him, and is this a guy that can play in the NHL?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched LJ lots. And he's a very gifted player. When you start to think about the LJ, you think about a player. Somebody's going to draft him, and he's going to be a player that's going to put up. He's going to put up points. I mean, that's the way he is. He's got a very creative mind. He's got a very competitive bent to his game, and he's going to need more time, not less time. He's going to have to wait till he's 22, 23 when he's physically mature. But those are the types of players. If I have a choice of, and I'm not saying that he should go in the 3rd round or the 5th round, but you get to a point where you just go, wait a second. There's a time when you just go, what he possesses and the skill set he has is absolutely worth drafting. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So that's where I see LJ. And I don't think you can rule him out, because he's another player that's shown that regardless of where he's played, he's found a way to be successful. You got to start believing that can still carry on. Tyler Johnson, Joe. He might be Tyler Johnson.
That's a solid one.
That'd be one heck of a comp there. I think people take 2-time Stanley Cup champion centers there, all-star centers.
Take it all the time.
Yeah.
Do you play much golf, Craig?
I used to play lots. I did. I used to play lots, and then it became a thing where I didn't play as much, and then your game suffers. No kidding, right? Your game suffers,
Yeah.
right? And then you go out and play. And so now you make one good shot out of every 6 or 7, and now the round gets longer. Your frustration levels become higher and greater, and you have a choice to make: either get back and play more, or you fall. So like, I love playing golf. I do. I love it. I do love it. And what I got to try to do is this. And I did, like, up until about 12, 13 years ago, I played lots. Like, and I loved playing, and it was good. But my game has slipped, and if I wanna get back to enjoying it, because I think that's the most frustrating thing, when you can play at a certain level, and then you find you're not anywhere close to it. You kind of, oh, why am I going to do this?
Final question, brought to you as always by our good friends at Waggle Golf. First, make sure you head over to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order. Craig, I'm going to have you give me 3 names here. Could be celebrity, athlete, dead or alive, fictional if you want.
Family. Whatever,
3 people that are going out with you for your dream golf foursome.
Oh, boy. Well,
and we'll say you're at the top of your game for this, by the way. We don't have to worry
about that. Well, you talk about see, to me, like golf, like I'm not going out to compete for the Masters. I'm going out to enjoy. You want to challenge yourself, and you want it to be enjoyable. I'm not going out with anybody that's going to have a serious mode on. That doesn't mean we have a case full of beer loaded either. I'm not into there too. I want to go out, and I want to really, really enjoy myself. I really want to go out and say. So the first person I would go with would be Tessa Buium, and she is working for the PWHL. If you haven't listened to her podcast along with Julia Teixeira, it's called Jocks and Jills, and she's a friend, but she is all kinds of fun, and she's all kinds of chirping, and nobody is off limits. So like that would be number one, without a doubt. 2 and 3, like I think that my number 2 would be my brother Todd, because he was a really, really good golfer, and he had a hip replacement. He's back playing golf again. And I know that as my younger brother, like, he would be able to chirp me about hey, like, really? That's all you can do? And he's way better. I might be better at him than some other things, but he's way better than me. And I think at his age now, he would give me some pointers, but he would also bait me and take money from me on certain bets, because that's what he does. He's one of those, bait and catch, and there's no release. You're hooked when you're with him. And then the third person that I would golf with would be a dear late friend of mine by the name of Jerry Melnick. He worked in the NHL for a long time. If you need a joke or a quip or a story or experience, and I golfed with him lots over the years, and he was wonderful. So that would be my threesome. Maybe people you don't know, but that's where I would want to be. Those are the 3 people. Jerry he played in the NHL, worked for the Flyers for a long, long time, and just a wonderful person. But that would be my threesome, and I guarantee you, we might not win, but nobody would have more fun or laughs than us.
For those of us who aren't great players, having fun is the most important part of it, and being outside and doing that. So, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Craig, for spending so much time with us and talking everything hockey, wild, some Tampa Bay references. I appreciated that. Enjoy the rest of the playoffs here, and we'll touch base with you later on towards the draft. So, thanks so much, Craig.
Yeah, no, I love Joe. You're amazing. We got a good friendship, and we've done it over years. I didn't even bring up anything from Michigan. Our Michigan ties. We got all kinds of ties here, Joe and I, and I'll finish with this. Outside of thanking you for having me, it's always a pleasure. But I think the Minnesota Wild are in a really good place. I think they're a team that is definitely going to move forward and be a competitive contender. Not competitive, a competitive contender.
Yeah, Wild fans will go crazy to hear that. So they've been waiting long enough. So they're hoping for some 91 North Stars magic to happen at some point. So we'll see. But thanks again, Craig. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
again, consummate pro, great conversation. Joe, last thing to just touch on quick as we wrap up, tease everyone. If you're not already subscribed with The Athletic, I don't know what you guys are doing or what we can do to further compel you, but those of you that are subscribed or are willing to subscribe, check out Joe's latest article on the Iowa Wild. And Joe, just wanted to give you a chance to tease a little bit and give some context for fans who are just beside themselves that there's seemingly no change with a team that has very much disappointed and failed to develop.
Yeah, it's, I did a story last year kind of behind the scenes of just, that was the first year with Brett McLean and trying to change the culture and as a first year coach and trying to teach. And I learned a lot just from that, they struggled last year, a lot of injuries last year as well, both sides. And it happened again this year. And so I think the question this time around was kind of what's the issue there? What's holding them back? And how is it affecting the development of players? Right. And I've always been interested in development and kind of the philosophies and everything like that. And I did a lot of work in Syracuse when I was in Tampa, and John Cooper always used to tell me, we thought the best way for prospects to develop was by winning, right? And that was a key to the foundation of their team from the AHL team in Norfolk that won the championship and the record. And all of a sudden, a lot of those guys came up and played the playoffs with the Lightning. Not every team is the same. Not every development system is there. Not every guy's prospect pool is the same. But there seem to be, for as much as things that they do well in Iowa, they take care of their players, food-wise, trading-wise, travel. They do a lot of things, that players are happy to play there and that they feel like they have the support overall. But there's still a disconnect, or there's still the lack of execution there, and the lack of results has to be a concern, I think, if you're a Wild fan or just Wild management as a whole, because eventually you have some of your top guys playing there. You have Jesper Wallstedt, your goalie of the future there. You have Liam Ohgren, a really good player. You have Lambos, a first-round pick who's really been developing well the last year. That's a positive story. Hunter Haight, Riley Height's going to be there. Charlie Stramel will probably be there. You look at this place as a very important kind of place to marinate for these prospects. And I went there. I talked to McLean, talked to players. I talked to Matt Hendricks, their GM, to just the philosophy. And, the thought that Matt Hendricks said is not a mandate for them to win. Obviously winning is important and you want to build winning habits, but, in their cycle of playing a lot of their kids and their prospects, it's almost like there's a little bit of a sacrifice in winning because of the roster that they're putting out or for whatever different reason. So it's just more of a philosophical argument and talking to different people there and scouts about the Iowa Wild and what they see. And that's a story that ran or posted Wednesday morning if people want to give it a look and see what they all think about it and what the players feel about it and what's the next steps. And but it'll clearly be an important start to the year next year for Iowa as more of the magnifying glasses on them.
For sure. Well, so you mentioned that article already out. Quick tease there. Anything coming up? I know Russo's covering the Eastern Conference Finals, but anything you or Mike have cooking that should be coming in the next week or two here for the Wild?
Well, we'll have more offseason primer stuff. We had the mailbag last week, covered a lot of different topics and questions that you guys had. But we'll do some more offseason primers of free agent targets and trade targets and what a Marco Rossi trade would look like. I have one coming up soon on the goalie tandem next year, Gustafsson and Wallstedt. Interesting dynamics the last couple of years with this being more of a partnership with Fleury and Fleury being okay and being a number two and backup and really a mentor to Gus. And now Gus mentions it's kind of being like a rivalry again with Wallstedt coming up and both of them obviously competing for the net. And it'll be an interesting dynamic to see, how much Gus learned from Flower and maybe he can be a mentor to Wallstedt. And Wallstedt, seems as of now willing to be able to learn from Gus, watching him succeed in the NHL. So that'll be one thing to watch behind the scenes next year. I talked to them about it and obviously talked to the goalie coach they have in Sweden about kind of who coached them both on how that might fit. So that'll be coming up in the next several days.
Awesome. And for anyone out there that wants more Danila Yurov content or just wants to actually put some play on the ice to all the nice things that people are saying about him, we do have highlight reels up for both the 2023-2024 and 2024-2025 seasons over there with Metallurg Magnitogorsk over at the SodaPod YouTube channel. Go check it out. Otherwise, we'll be back here next week. hopefully there's more Minnesota Wild stuff to talk about, but we don't really have any control over whether any news will be here or not. But appreciate you guys tuning in for yet another week of Fellowship of the Rink. Stay classy, stay to hockey.